Good morning, everyone. So today is the eighth episode of our podcast, our In Touch podcast, and today we'll be talking about resiliency in the Philippines. This has been a hot and contested topic recently, diba? This 2020 with the pandemic, the barrage of typhoons that still keep hitting us. So today in our, effort to talk more about mental health in the Philippines, this is what we're going to be focusing on. So let me introduce myself. My name is Mara Yusingco. I'm one of the psychologists working in InTouch. I've been with them since 2019. And of course, InTouch has been around since 1980s. So InTouch is a mental health advocate. So we've been advocating for mental health response since then. So I work here, and with me today are some of our teammates from In Touch as well. So yeah.
Okay, let me introduce myself as well. I am MJ Gallamoza or MJ. That's my nickname. I've been an InTouch volunteer for a year now. I started last May 2020, and then how am I as an advocate? Actually, I'm a clinical psychology student as well. So talagang advocacy ko yung mental health. Of course, raising awareness and actually doing something about it. Kasi 'di ba, those are two completely different things. So, yeah, it's been a good experience for me so far. And now that we're going to talk about Filipino resiliency in the Philippines, sobrang excited ako for us to discuss more about it. Ayun lang.
Hi, I'm Dan. I've actually wanted to be a psychologist now for pretty much my entire life. And then after college, I realized that to practice, you needed a master's degree. So I went on to take my clinical psychology degree. And I'm currently doing my internship actually here at InTouch.
So hi everyone, good morning. I'm Kimmy Aguilar and you can call me Kimmy. Same with MJ and Dan. I'm also a master in clinical psychology student. And siguro when I heard the word mental health, parang the fire within me ignited. So parang I'm advocate of mental health talaga. So I really want to help, especially in the part of mental health. And siguro right now, with the topic that we have, siguro for me, the tagline na maibibigay ko siguro is lumalaban kahit pandemya. And we will delve further about it sa topic na ito. So, yan.
I love it, Kimmy. I love that. Lumalaban kahit may pandemya. So I think that should be the tagline of everyone here. Or
Right.
walang should. No should. Okay. I guess since we're going to be talking about resiliency in the Philippines, maybe it's good to start muna, center to ourselves. Maybe we could talk about how have we been, exercising. Exercising is the word. Or how have we been resilient, siguro,
Yeah.
for the past year that has been. So maybe do I start or would someone else like to start?
Maybe you can start and then we'll
Yeah.
follow.
Oh my gosh. I don't know the answer to my question. No, pero how have I been resilient this year? Well, I think for me, I've been resilient in such a way na, when we're thrown into this situation nung start of the year last year, obviously there were a lot of changes. I also had to do some adjustments. I guess for me, I think how I've been resilient is by being flexible, I suppose, and adaptable. So I had to live with my family for a bit, had to get used to working with my big household. And then eventually I moved out. So that was another adjustment. So actually last year was a year of adjustment. And I think I exercised my resiliency by going with that flow. Okay, so I don't know if that answers my question, but that's what comes up.
Actually, who have been, ano ba? Paano ba ako naging resilient? Actually, I don't know the answer kasi um, last year was pretty rough on me, actually. Um, I also had some experiences, bad experiences actually, especially in terms of employment kasi I changed jobs in the middle of pandemic. So, syempre, 'di ba, yung adjustment period nasanay ka na dun sa previous job mo and then magsa-start ka ng new path sa new environment. Pero dun ko na realize na we can really us as a Filipino din talaga. Parang part na rin ng trait natin, yung pagiging resilient and pagiging, ano yun, easily adaptable to changes, di ba? So, ayun. And I also discovered a lot of things about myself kasi before, akala ko hindi ko kayang gawin yung mga ibang bagay. Tapos ngayon, nagagawa ko na siya. So, ayun. Yun lang naman yung mga things na masasabi ko na related sa resiliency.
Yeah, I actually think that's such a good point, though, what you just said, na resiliency being a trait. Because I think usually, like, how you differentiate it from, like, coping mechanisms or, adapting and all these things. Those are actions. So, resiliency is really the trait behind those actions of being adaptable and everything. So, to answer Mara's question, no? So, for me, I when I thought about it, when you raised the question, I was really thinking, was I really resilient and everything? And then I realized almost the same thing happened to me. I lost my job due to COVID. Actually, they suddenly said they couldn't finance the company I was working on, and then we suddenly stopped working, and we just had to fend off on our own. And like when I think about it like that, I realized na it wasn't such a hard process, like it allowed me also to kind of focus on my studies, focus on clinical psychology, and focus on doing my internship talaga. So the timing wasn't so bad for me, and I think that just keeping in mind, that you kind of just have to solve the immediate problems that you're going through. It's kind of like taking everything kind of on a daily basis, like day to day, like, okay, here's what I have to do. This is the state of the world right now. I don't really have much of a choice. So you just do it. So yeah, I think that's the mindset that kind of helped me get through this stage in particular. How about you, Kimmy?
Siguro to add with what you've mentioned about coping mechanism and adaptability, I have a fair share of my resiliency experience because last year, my grandmom died and I was very close with her. So siguro yun, not only myself, but my family as well. Siguro din na-test yung resiliency namin. But one thing that I've learned from it is acceptance. It's very important to accept that, yeah, we should grieve. Kailangan nating maramdaman yung pain, kailangan nating maramdaman yung negative emotion that within it. However, after that, siguro, good thing siguro nga palagi namin sinasabi, just to share, palagi namin sinasabi with what happened with my grandma. Namatay siya nang she's happy. Wala siyang sakit or anything, but namatay siya because of old age. She's actually 96 years old.
Wow.
So it's a long journey. Kaya that's why, even though na masakit yung living experience for us, matagal siya, yes. But when we accepted it, the whole family, it becomes an experience that babaunin namin for the longest time. So siguro yung naging share ko ng resiliency. And for me, siguro important nga doon sa resiliency is acceptance and knowing the fact that after the pain, we should move forward.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for that sharing. So we're picking up a lot from what you guys were talking about sa experiences nyo. So thank you guys for being so candid. I didn't know that you guys went through all of these things last year. It really, I guess, goes to show na with the pandemic happening, it really hit us all in different ways. And I guess in a way, di ba, parang some are hit harder than others, but no one was really spared, I suppose. And I'm hearing things here, so parang I guess ang napupulot ko ay words like adaptability, flexibility, and there's this concept of it being a trait, but also a process. Parang na-pick up ko yon na parang it's a trait that fuels our way of like reacting to things. But it's also like a process, yung process of acceptance na sinasabi nga ni Kimmy at ni Dan of coming to terms, diba? To a new future also and moving forward. Ako talaga, when I think of resiliency, yung image na very stark sa akin is the image of a bamboo. I think it's a metaphor it's used across cultures, pero before kasi, for one of the research projects na I was part of, it's actually disaster leadership facilitating resiliency. One of the interviewees that we would have, it's a community in CDO. They describe resiliency as being able to bounce back, para daw kawayan. So whenever I think of resiliency, naiisip ko yung kawayan, being able to bend and flow with adversity, then bouncing back again. Hopefully better this time. So that's how I think of what I think of when I think of the word resiliency. So yeah.
Actually, I agree with Mara kasi ako din, parang when I heard resiliency, parang bamboo din yung, I remember one Japanese proverb na parang sinasabi niya, the bamboo that bends stronger than the oak that resists. Parang more unlike that. So, well, we experience things, especially for the Filipinos, parang nakakabit na nga sa mga Filipino resiliency. Pero, why is this so talaga ba? Kailangan ba talaga na talagang Filipino resiliency na yung nilagay natin, more unlike that. Pero siguro, going back with the bamboo, same with Mara, yung experience ng resiliency, even though with the experience that we have, the pandemic, the typhoon, Taal volcano eruption, yung mga ganyan na nangyari. So lahat ng yan, mahirap for us. Pero siguro kung mapapansin natin, kahit na mahirap, we have ibabalik ko lang dun sa na-mention natin kanina, we have the tendency to adapt and to be flexible and accept things na parang even though kahit ganun siya, it's painful, it's difficult, however, we tried to move forward and yun nga, siguro nakikita din natin sa social media na kahit ang hirap ng sitwasyon, nagagawa pa rin nating mag-joke yung mga different memes, mga gano'n. Kasi nga, we find something na, we find parang positive despite of the negativities. More like that.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, no, so resiliency for me, I guess, yeah, whatever you guys said, that's definitely an accurate depiction. No? But for me, like coming from, since back in undergrad, it was actually part of my thesis. We came across resiliency as sort of, I guess, an effect or something that mediated or rather facilitated the ability of certain individuals to bounce back nga from adversity. So for me, it's more of a trait. Like it's something that usually exists within a person. And then, as I mentioned a while ago, like for example, like you guys mentioned, humor. That's sort of a coping mechanism that exists within the realm of someone who is resilient, for example. And then there's also acceptance. Um, which kind of facilitates whether this resilient individual is able to kind of go through that process that we mentioned earlier. And I think one of the things about resiliency kasi is that yeah, it's a trait, and usually traits where they're typically enduring, and um it's, I guess you would say that it's hard for it to be kind of built. But I think as compared to maybe other psychological constructs or maybe other traits or personalities, I think there are clear ideas, no, of what makes a resilient individual or how one can build resiliency, which touches on like family support, social support, and everything. So yeah.
Actually, sobrang naano ko din sa concept nga of a bamboo. Kasi 'di ba, a bamboo kapag may malakas na wind, it bends, 'di ba? Parang hindi siya nagbe-break easily. And for us Filipinos, parang sobrang apparent nung trait na 'yon or sobrang apparent nung pagiging resilient natin, especially na sobrang daming mga crisis ganyan. And 'di ba, of course, resiliency is going beyond or overcoming the struggles and crisis life throws at us. So, for me kasi, since nabanggit nga ni Kimi kanina, ano siya, process siya, and it's also a trait, sobrang parang ang dami mong ma-associate na mga things when it comes to resiliency. And for me kasi, pag sinabi nating resilient, um, sobrang positive niya, 'di ba? Parang in a positive light natin siya tinitingnan. So, for us Filipinos, parang kahit sobrang daming mga struggles in life or sobrang daming mga bad experiences, mga disasters na nararanasan, paano natin nagagawang gumiti? Paano natin nagagawang mag-share ng mga memes pa on Facebook and things like that? Siguro isa rin talaga sa mga remarkable traits natin as Filipinos. Sobrang bilis tayong mag-overcome. Hindi tayo nagsa-stop or hindi natin inaalaw yung mga experiences or yung mga hardships na um, ang tawag dito, parang pahirapan pa tayo ng matagal. Parang lagi tayo naghahanap ng silver lining. Ganon. Oh, very Catriona. Ay, very, ano yan, very Catriona. Ayun.
Right. Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, I get what you guys are saying. Na parang, I guess what Kimmy and MJ was saying, that there's something about how we can still make light of certain situations and find hope so that we could move forward in our ability to sort of like, yun nga, gain that acceptance and able to move, for us to be able to move forward.
Yeah, one of the concepts actually that we stumbled upon, which was not expected, no, was this concept of like thriving. So it's the idea nga that, even as a resilient individual, it usually you sorry, that's not true. So as a resilient individual, for example, usually you would come across a problem, and then you'd be able to adapt to it, solve it, or whatever you do with the problem, right? But I guess what makes a resilient individual kind of different from other individuals is that after they bounce back, so let's say you were at this point, right, when when things were sort of neutral with you, nothing was happening, and then you come across a problem and you dip down in terms of your mood or in terms of your well-being. But as a resilient individual, once that problem is resolved, they still do go down just as much as other people do, but they're able to actually rise up and even beat like their the zero level of whatever their well-being was at the time. So I think that's a good maybe indicator of someone who's resilient if they're able to somehow, I don't know, manipulate the situation to kind of become an advantage for them, or find a way na they can turn that bad thing into something that can be even better than it was when it initially revealed itself.
Okay, okay. So thriving is a concept related and associated to
Yeah, yeah,
resiliency.
associate.
That's interesting. And I think I like yung sinabi mo na there's that concept of hindi lang siya back to status quo. It's about coming back even better. And I think we
Yeah.
can relate that in our conversations later. Balikan natin in context of Filipinos, disaster, resiliency, and all of that, what it means to come back better.
But I just have one question to you guys. Parang how do you like differentiate or paano niyo separate yung false optimism to resiliency? Parang ganun. How do you say na parang hindi na siya hindi na parang maganda yung meaning ng resilience ng individual or hindi na maganda yung parang nagiging ano ng individual. Parang false optimism na lang siya. Ganun.
Siguro for me, when I heard yung parang false optimism, parang naalala ko yung actually trait ba to ng mga Filipino din or what? The bahala na. 'Di ba? We usually Filipinos say bahala na. So ngayong pandemic, like for example, well, it's the reality. Mapapansin natin yung mga ibang mga tao na they need to go work outside. Parang their family will say na, oh, bakit lalabas ka? Hindi ka ba natatakot with the pandemic or whatever? Parang they will respond, bahala na kasi my family needs it. Parang ganon. So, siguro din sa false optimism na part na tinanong ni MJ and with the true resiliency part, I think nagiging parang false optimism lang siya when, for me, I'm speaking for myself, parang, halimbawa, tulad nung binigay ko na example, they went outside pero they know the danger or parang what will happen. However, parang for them, kahit na ma-hospital kung ma-hospital or whatever, magkasakit or magkasakit, basta I need to go out. Parang yun yung nagiging false optimism kasi they need to go out to tend their family para mabigyan or masupport yung family nila. Nagiging resilient siya for me. Parang for me, yung totoong resiliency is when at the back of our mind, even though masasaktan, even though magkakasakit or magkakaroon ng negativities na ma-face natin along paglabas, yung iniisip natin na mas importante na mapakain natin yung family natin. And we're holding on to our faith na yon. Parang we have someone to back us up. Parang yun yung nagiging isa sa mga trait ng Filipino. Siguro hindi ko alam kung nag-make sense ako. Pero
You do. I get it. Yeah.
Yung sa mga Filipino din, siguro idadagdag ko din yung part na yun, yung parang meron tayong support system palagi.
Yeah.
Kaya naniniwala tayo na kahit lumabas man, hindi ito for us, hindi ito para sa sarili natin, but for other people. More like that.
Yeah. Ako parang for me yung sa false optimism versus resiliency. I think, diba, parang when we study any trait in the realm of psychology, even adaptive traits can become maladaptive in excess, diba? So, I guess for me, it veers off to that parang spectrum of false optimism kapag yung, I guess there's like an overconfidence or over optimism that's unfounded on real resources,
Yeah.
real reality, I suppose, di ba? Na to the point na wala naman siyang realidad, that we're parang fixing our hope on something that can probably never happen. And I guess for me, resiliency which later there's a conversation on this kasi nga, di ba, contested actually ang topic of resiliency last year and this year. Sometimes kasi parang I guess, yun nga, nagiging maladaptive ang resiliency kapag it makes us tolerate hardship, diba? Na parang okay lang lahat, sige na, abuse, it's okay. In the name of like surviving, that we don't actually, kasi sabi nga ni Dan resiliency is not just going back to status quo, it's coming back better. So, it becomes false hope when the mechanisms in place or the resiliency doesn't really lead back to things getting better. It just goes back, diba? Or nothing really happens. So for me, that's the difference. I hope that answers your question,
Yeah,
MJ.
but actually, that's really good what you just said. Because the thing is, like false. For example, if we're gonna compare it to resiliency and false optimism, resiliency, first of all, that's the trait behind it. But false optimism or false positivism, whatever you want to call it, is is also a coping mechanism. It's just that it turns out that it's maladaptive. Like it seems like what you could compare siguro is more like acceptance, I guess, versus like false positivism or false optimism. So the thing about, I guess, that the difference now between the two, I think Mara nga mentioned this, is kind of how, I guess, false optimism is founded upon like irrational beliefs. I think that's the super positive and everything. But yun nga, they're not based on, as Mara said, reality. There's no evidence to kind of back up that positivism that you have, or it's like yun nga tolerating hardships and acceptance. It's very difficult, no? Because it's like you do want to kind of feel like, yeah, things are okay and everything, and there is a positive sort of feedback you get from thinking that way. But then yun nga, there are times I think this is where the discussion is leading to. So yeah, it's a difficult, I don't know, it's really a difficult thing, I think, to go through, or to even decipher when is it bad and when is it a good thing to have.
For me kasi when, 'di ba parang when we say false optimism, it's more on like what you've said earlier, parang believing in something, pero you're not actually doing something to tackle it. Parang, you
Mm,
just believe that it will get better eventually, pero you're not actually doing something to solve it, or you're not actually doing something to overcome the problem or the stressor sa life mo. So, for me, parang gano'n siya nagiging false optimism siya if you only rely on your belief, tapos hindi ka naman
oh,
you're not doing anything to move forward and actually do something to cope or to adapt. Parang iniisip mo na lang na um, magiging okay din siya or magiging okay din naman ako eventually, pero siguro for now, magstay na lang muna ako sa ganito kasi it's comfortable. Parang nandun naman yung belief or nandun naman yung paniniwala na malalagpasan din. Parang just wait for something or naghahanap ka pa ng sign,
mm,
kumbaga, na um, magiging okay din siya. Parang for me, that's it. Parang, kasi when you're resilient, diba? When you're a resilient person, you're acknowledging or ina-acknowledge mo yung experience. Parang ganun. For me, yun lang naman. Yun lang, actually, sobrang interesting ng mga answers nyo kasi syempre, different perspectives, diba?
Right. Okay.
That's really good.
But yeah, we've talked a lot about how resiliency is a trait, but I think it's also important then to highlight the process side of resiliency. So it's both. So I think it's both a trait, and you guys can sound off in a bit. Na it's both a trait, but it's also a process. Na I think it's a trait in a sense that there are certain things that people can, or a nation can embody or can inherently have. Like siguro yung optimism. Tayo Filipinos, we are good at meaning making, diba? Acceptance that facilitates the trait side of resiliency. But I think this one really, yung process side is what ties to yung sinasabi nating other side of resiliency. Na as much as we Filipinos try to exhibit these traits, process-wise, medyo mahirap because contextually, meaning yung factors in communities, societies, and available resources are, you know, abjectly lacking, I suppose, yung support. And kasi di ba parang when we talk about resiliency, we want things to be better. We're not just accepting things and moving on. We want things to come back better. And I think yun yung nagkukulang na parang wala tayong support to facilitate the process of building resiliency. We have it, but then we need help to further facilitate this so that we don't just accept but we actually move forward, diba? So, wala lang. Thoughts. May
Siguro
thoughts
just,
ba kayo?
siguro just to add with what Mara mentioned, kasi naalala ko lang, kasi yun nga, minsan, yung sa lacking na part, hindi natin napapansin na, ibabalik ko lang with the false optimism and the resiliency part, hindi natin napapansin na sa sobrang resilient natin na nagiging false optimism na minsan, nakakompromise yung physical at saka mental health natin. So, dun sa part na yun, siguro, yun, yung katulad nung sinabi ni Mara, we need support for that part as well. Paano ba talaga yung process for the good resiliency part? Yun lang for me.
Actually, I'm sorry. I think of so many things. Kasi I really like what MJ said a while ago. And then I was listening also to what Mara was saying. So like, to relate the two, no? Like, yun nga, false optimism being kind of what Mara said, being kind of like, na the difference would be the inaction, or rather, you're not striving towards that goal. No, and everything. But I think they're like related nga to what Mara said nga. Kasi like the support, like what gives you resilience, you know? And I think na one of the things is really sort of, like for example, why do Filipinos seem to inherently have it? And I really think it has to do with sort of the collectivist culture. Now we're so family oriented, and just in general, like even your neighbors, you're very close to them. You feel like here for this is okay. Okay, this is one thing I wanna say about the Filipinos. No, kasi like in other countries, it's such like there's so much difficulty just for people to wear masks, for example. But here, when that started in the Philippines, so easy because you know people are thinking that it's not just for you; it's also for the other people around you, and it's as simple as that here in the Philippines. So, and you know, with family support, social support, and having a culture like this gives you sort of this sense of security. And but in relation to okay, this is hard. But in relation to what MJ said, no, like kind of this false optimism. Sometimes you would get that from, let's say, the belief in like a higher being, right? Like that's also like a source of security because you believe that they'll be the ones to kind of um they have good intentions. They're going to, you know, things happen for a reason. Things life will become better, and you know these things like um it's hard there, like whether to say that's, you know, is that irrational, is there this action really need to come from them in their belief system, no? It's so are these things there are I really feel like yeah, there are certain cases we can say na oh it could be detrimental, and there are certain cases where we can say na oh it's what's keeping the Filipinos alive, it's just so it's like you really just have to have a balance, and
Mm,
but they both existed in the realm of like resiliency in the Philippines, sort of like that.
true. So what do people mean ba when they say that Filipinos are resilient? So we touched on some of the traits kanina, 'di ba? Parang spirituality, collectivism. But yeah, like saan ba 'to nanggaling tong 'di ba? Parang yung concept na the Filipino people are quote unquote resilient. Where did this statement or this narrative of us as a people come from?
Diba, our country has been colonized by different before.
Mm.
Parang sobrang dami mga other parang nation or state yung naka-colonize sa country natin. And parang I feel like inimpose nila sa atin yung belief ng Filipino resiliency or Filipinos being resilient. And now that it's pandemic, parang makikita mo yon sa other people, 'di ba? Most of people na mga nagtatrabaho, they lost their jobs pero nasa-survive pa nila somehow nasa-survive pa nila na rin nila yung everyday lives nila by doing sidelines, for example, 'di ba? Parang nakakaisip talaga tayo agad ng creative way to help ourselves survive. Parang may mga ibang nag-online business, food businesses, parang ganun, para makikita mo dun na since inimpose sa atin yung belief na resilient tayo, parang kailangan nating i-live up yung ganong klaseng expectation. Parang when there are disasters, parang natural na makikita mo sa news, 'di ba, mga headlines or newspaper, may mga nakangiti na individuals kahit nasa ano sila ng bansa, nakangiti sila, ganyan. Meron pong mga dogs na sinasama, parang ganyan. Parang feeling ko doon siya nagmula kasi sila yung nagbigay sa atin ng idea that we are resilient. Parang kahit ano, pwede nating ma-adapt, ganyan. Although sometimes it is being romanticized nga, na-over-glorify yung idea ng resilience. Parang for me, ganun. Dun siya for me lang, personal ano lang yan na,
Mm.
dun siya talaga nagmula.
Siguro for me, since we're living in this area, in the Philippines, na parang yung weather talagang paiba-iba. And
Mm.
parang very normal na sa Philippines yung 20 typhoons in a year. Parang
Yes.
normal na nadadating yung typhoon, and then yun nga, yung earthquake, and then last year, nagkaroon ng volcanic eruption. So parang because of doon sa mga nangyayari na yun, parang we have to become one. Parang the
Mm.
Filipinos become to be the Philippines to become a resilient nation because we have to dahil din sa
Yeah.
sitwasyon na face natin. Parang for me, yun yung naging ano. And siguro good example ngayong pandemic, yun nga, katulad ng na-mention ni MJ, we try to be creative. We look for something alternative para even though na we lost our job or mga ganun katulad nun, online selling, parang yun yung naging resort natin. So, kasi nga, we have to. Hindi naman po pwede na hayaan lang natin yung family natin na walang makain, pandemic na nga. And yun nga, siguro, hindi naman tayo palaging or forever aasa kay government.
Those are two really good answers. And yeah, I think that's definitely probably like that's probably where it really started, our history and sort of like yeah, we had to come together to bring the Spanish out of here. And then the US naman, they decided to stay after us. And then the Japanese, there's so many. And then you have this event where, Filipinos are already the ones ruling the country. But we have had so many times where it really depended on the people, kind of the outcome
Mm.
of, the Philippines survival. Even now, there are so many private companies that are offering vaccines, for example, for the pandemic.
Mm.
It's not just the government that's doing everything. There's so many. So it just shows na yeah, we're kind of exercising what we already know is to be kind of maybe the outcome for success or what needs to happen for success to that's the thing, no? Like when it comes to, for example, yeah, struggle. there's no greater motivation than something that's sort of life and death. So you have, I think that's why, yeah, that's a, like I mentioned, the concept of thriving, when you become better than you are. Because normally when you're okay, when nothing's happening in your life, you don't feel the need to kind of improve as much as you do when you're, going through something very difficult. And maybe that's why, yeah, with the mention of even climate being a problem here in the Philippines, just you're sort of prepared all the time to kind of just solve the next problem that's most likely going to happen. You're already in anticipation of something that's about to happen. So you
Right.
kind of, in a way, it's not, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily pessimistic. No, it's sort of accepting that life here in the Philippines and life, well, I think anywhere else naman, it's just maybe the scales are just different. It's difficult, and being able to accept that makes you, like, allows you or enables you to kind of prepare to face rather multiple problems.
Okay. Right, right. So parang it's a reality.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately what we have to go through. And we are stronger people because we do go through it. Recently, di ba, parang last year with how the pandemic affected us, in the middle of the pandemic, nagkabagyo, ilang bagyo that devastated people. We're already devastated by the pandemic. And so, syempre, di ba, parang with the narrative that the Filipinos are resilient, people or the news started talking about the Filipino resiliency again. And this time, we pushed back. So there has been a lot of pushback by the media, by younger people, and yeah, by advocates also, mental health advocates in particular, talking about how we should, I know, we should like really examine this discourse or this discussion on Filipino resiliency, highlighting na by framing us as resilient, we have become vulnerable to the exploitation and abuses of inaction.
And actually, when we say Filipino resiliency kasi talaga, no, parang it's an overused word here in our country, especially. Parang it is being glorified nga, as I have said earlier. Parang when, like, right now, since it's a pandemic and madaming natural disasters na nangyari sa country natin, parang we rely on each other na lang, parang as a way of, surviving. Parang for us, sanay na tayo sa ganun. Parang, when there are disasters, parang yun nga, sabi nga ni Dan kanina, parang it's our response na prepared na tayo for those things. Parang some of us or those concerned individuals, concerned citizens will do something about it. Parang for me, ganun.
I think, diba, parang, I think recognizing that we're resilient in itself is not necessarily bad. Appreciating our resiliency is not problematic, but I think it's problematic when the resiliency of Filipinos is becoming used to bypass actual suffering.
Siguro to echo MJ and Mara, ayun nga, Filipino resiliency, there's no question with that eh. Kasi parang andun na talaga siya sa atin. Ang naging concern lang is, yun nga, last year, nung naging issue yan. So tayo, na mga Filipinos, we have to act. And that action, siguro one thing, community pantry.
Yeah.
Yun yung nakita ko din siguro for me, parang part din ng resiliency, yung community pantry, yung pagpatak ng community pantry. Kasi other than the resiliency part, yung treat ng mga Pilipino, the bayanihan concept.
Yeah.
Nag-arise siya from there. So, nabuhay na naman siya, and it gives a good sense with us Filipinos. We have to act. Tayo na yung mag-act.
True.
And yung resiliency natin, andyan na siya eh. So, siguro, i-enhance further na lang natin siya with the alternatives or the things that we can do.
Yeah, I agree. No? Like, I also have, I guess, like, the thing is, these two things can exist. Eh. You don't naman necessarily have to rely solely on the government. You don't necessarily need to rely solely on the community. It's good that, the community is there, and it's good that the government is there as well. So sana, I mean, ideally, those two things kind of exist and serve their purpose to the fullest so that we can be as efficient as possible when it comes to these disasters, for example.
And siguro as advocates, open up the space for conversation. Maybe I don't know, yun nga, contribute to lobbying, policying, or just like siguro yun nga, the recognition of it lang. So I like that. Two things can exist together. But yeah, so hopefully nga that we do get structural or systematic support because even as we are resilient, yung parang kumbaga yung bouncing back capacity, how fast we can get back to normalcy, or yung sabi nga natin kanina na a better normal. It's, I guess, I think it's highly it's a bit of a stilted process if there's no structural support also. So we can always survive, push forward, be better, and we will always. A resiliency that's not just passive. Now we have to smile and be grateful, but an active, agentic resiliency.
Actually, I wanted to share this also. It's a very interesting story, although I can't recall the particular person who, but he wrote a book about his life, and he was this black individual in the States who was kind of going through, um, sort of that thing, that racist, like he was experiencing racism in the society, but he was able to overcome it by, actually going to school, um, getting a scholarship for more education, and everything came from a very low income environment, and he was able to go past that. And there was a bit of some guilt, I guess, of sort of he felt like he was betraying his community in a sense. It's very strange. But then
Mm.
the thing is the key takeaway from that, at least from his perspective now, from all of the struggles that he went through. He saw all of these individuals who were, you know, part of his community, low income, very difficult to climb, very difficult to have a better life, to ask for a better life. But then a lot of the individuals there would sort of keep pandering or keep on it kind of keep on just they'll just sustain that sort of lifestyle that they already have and just stay there for and then keep complaining about the system, how it's against them, how it's not advantages for them. And it's he just realized that like a lot of that he had to teach. Eventually, he started teaching. That he had to teach some of the individuals from his community that you don't have to wait for the system to change for you to change. So despite your life kind of going against you, or it's like a where it's almost like I don't know, what's the term for it? It's like a battle, an uphill battle, man. So it's
Mm.
like despite being sort of like an uphill battle, you have to do it because you won't get wherever you are just simply just by complaining or adhering to certain beliefs that they'll tell you that they'll get better, but you're not taking action as well. So yeah, that's it. Sorry,
Relation to
and
mental health naman, 'di ba?
I
Parang one of the barriers for peoples or Filipinos to seek formal help or professional help is actually the fact that we are known to be resilient. Parang yun, isa yun sa mga top barriers based on that. Which
True.
And for me, parang, of course, it's understandable na parang when people seek for help, parang ina-acknowledge niya na meron, he needs or talagang kailangan niya ng support, di ba, from others. And of course, life doesn't really get easier. It gets harder each day. And it is to us to become more stronger or of course to develop coping mechanisms, healthy coping strategies as well, and for us to be adaptable to changes. Of course, responsibility to act on it then for us to build a stronger resiliency. Parang for me, that's it. Yun lang naman yung mga takeaways ko based on our conversation.
Yeah.
Siguro, relate ko lang dun sa, if you're familiar with Nightbird in AGT, na-mention na yung we can't wait until life isn't hard to be happy. Parang
Mm.
siguro for that resiliency, kasi the hardship, nandiyan talaga siya. So, hindi natin siya maaalis. So, hindi na natin kailangan maghintay na mawala yung hardship or anything. But yung resiliency natin, it's there na kasi innate na yan sa atin. So, siguro, understand the process, accept, and move forward. Siguro yun yung importante. And to agree with MJ, if hindi naman kasi if we seek help for professionals, especially for mental health, it means na we have problems. Hindi kasi ganun yun eh. So siguro, when we acknowledge that things hindi that na things is out of our way, parang ganun, we seek help and accept the things are not in our way. More on like that.
For me, siguro different dimensions. So, for people who are empowered, is to use that privilege and that voice for a call to action, for advocacy, and to still hold people accountable. And siguro, for our industry, the psych industry, I think we need to make ourselves more accessible. And that's what you guys do. But kulang pa din kasi there's still a whole gap, di ba? Parang hindi ito nagta-trickle down to, I guess, certain communities pa din. I feel like we really need to reach out to paraprofessionals, utilize yung bayanihan, train local community leaders to provide basic psychosocial support. I think is a good parang stance. Siguro for a more empowered resiliency, yun nga, as normal citizens, quote unquote, na hindi naman tayo people in power, we can be part of communities, both in providing and accepting support to others, care for others as we care for ourselves, and not to be, sabi nyo nga, afraid to receive care. And siguro lastly, iba-iba kasi dimensions, di ba? Still, the burden of resilience hopefully to be shared so that we can have a sustainable effort towards development talaga. Basic access to basic needs kasi mahirap maging resilient pag gutom or may sakit or wala kang access to services. So, yun pa din, the sharing of that burden and responsibility siguro.
Yeah, all right. So for me, no, it's really just that. Like, don't wait. Don't wait for the world to change, for you to change. And the thing about resiliency is it's kind of acceptance, and accepting that this is your life right now. This is the way things are kind of working out right now. You kind of just you have to accept the power of accepting something is understanding what you need to do after. So once you can accept that this is a problem, you can understand that, oh, this is what I have to do to solve that problem. And that includes everything from, for example, even your own mental health. Like, let's say you can accept that, I'm not feeling very good these days. It's my motivation has been sort of very low lately, and I've been thinking I can't focus, I can't function properly. Maybe I need to see a therapist, for example. So things like that. It's like you're just acknowledging, like, that's one thing you can just simply do. Just be aware of some of the areas where you're lacking, or some of the things that are a problem, and then addressing them. I think that's a good exercise for even resiliency building. And you if once you find success in doing that, you'll become more confident in doing it, and you'll become also better at kind of seeing those patterns of where things are wrong, and being able to kind of think of the solution even faster. So it's a good way also to kind of build, no, that resilience, can make it a habit, I would say.
To what Dan said, no? Parang resiliency is more on accepting your new you still hold yourself responsible for a higher standard or a better life, parang a better self, parang ganun. Parang it's okay to acknowledge the things na hindi mo na kaya, or it's okay to accept defeat if you can no longer adapt to things. Kaya nga tayo mayroong mga mental health professionals, for example. There are other supports na we can utilize as well. For me, that's it lang naman.
Siguro for me, no matter how hard life may give, keep flowing ahead. And let's acknowledge and accept that we have weaknesses and limitations. Even though na kaya nating move forward and we are resilient enough, there are limitations and weaknesses that we must acknowledge and accept.
Ang naririnig ko is, ang last words natin when we're talking about resiliency and yung hopeful takeaways natin to our listeners is, I think we talk a lot about acceptance and awareness. So I guess opening our eyes to what is happening internally also, and maybe by being aware of our internal limitations, our internal strengths. So limitations like sila Kimmy said, we can sort of really sit down and work on what we can be truly accountable for. And work on that part na kaya natin maging accountable for and responsible for. And at the same time, still, I guess, on a greater, I guess, ecological sphere, to still demand na those na hindi na natin within accountability, pwede nating, I guess, we can always demand for that and accept na that's our limitation. Okay, so I don't know, guys. It was an interesting conversation. Very hot topics indeed. Thank you, guys. Thank you to our listeners. But yeah, so hopefully every Sunday we have these podcasts. Please listen. Drop us a listen, drop us a comment. We'd like you guys, our ating mga listeners, to be part of our conversation. Agree with us, disagree with us. We need to open discourses on mental health, personal structural level. And yeah, for me, I'd say goodbye na to everyone. So I'd give you guys a chance to say goodbye also to our listeners. Yeah.
Thanks everyone. I actually learned a lot from it and very interesting yung naging topic natin. And I'm hoping na yung mga listeners din natin is nag-enjoy din sila with us. So thank you very much and thank you for the listeners. So watch out for the next podcast episode.
Yes, actually, I really enjoyed our conversation. No? Parang a very normal conversation on a Sunday morning. Parang ganon. So, yun lang. I would like to invite everyone then to stay tuned to the next podcast episode. Yun lang naman.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really, I could actually talk about this for hours and hours. So sana kung if you want an extended version, just say in the comments
Oh
so
my
I can
God.
talk more. No, but really,
Live
it's been
stream.
such an insightful conversation, and I'm happy that we have you as listeners to kind of
Yes.
at least get your own takeaways. And then if you have your own takeaways, have your own insights, or even have opposing ideas, please comment them down below. I think it would be such a good help just for everyone to know that
Yeah.
this thing is something beyond really anyone can comprehend, because it's a very difficult topic to begin with.
Okay. Yes. So yun nga, everyone listening, please comment. Thank you from the four of us, si MJ, Kimmy, Dan, Danielle, and Mara. So bye.
Thanks everyone. Good morning.
Good morning. Bye-bye.